Hello, everyone. My name is J.R. Dukes. I am your advisor for a better life. I am currently a personal life coach, and exactly what I am here for is to help you live your best life. Uh, I got many subjects I want to talk about, and today I'm going to start off by talking about a subject near and dear to my heart, and that is asset protection. Oftentimes in life, as business individuals, we can work our entire lives, busting it early morning to late night, working countless hours, doing countless things. We may acquire quite a bit of money. We may become financially wealthy. Unfortunately, we happen to live in one of the greatest litigious societies since the great Roman Empire. Don't get me wrong, I'm a patriot. I love our country. I love everything about our country. It's been very, very good to me and my family. At the same time, we have to be cognizant of the fact that in our country, people sue each other all the time. There are literally tens of millions of lawsuits that are filed every year. I used to tell people all the time that, listen, it's hard to make money, and it's even harder to keep money. And I think the fact that there are so many lawyers out there just emphasizes this point. For a quick example, you can be a doctor, go to medical school, pay your dues. You're in, you're doing countless hours of work. You work your entire life, and God forbid that you have a kid of yours that's out one night and they have a terrible accident where there's people that were killed as a result of this accident. And unfortunately, not only was there deaths involved in this situation, the individuals that are the survivors left behind are going to turn around and sue this particular doctor. The problem is, we're going to assume, what if there's not enough insurance? What if the doctor only had $5 or $10 million in insurance, and all of a sudden they end up with a verdict for like $50 million? Well, guess what? Once the insurance is exhausted, they are going to go after the doctor's personal property at that point. And in most states in the United States, that is a bad situation to be in. Because what will happen is, once that insurance policy is exhausted, they're going to simply come after your house, your cars, whatever other assets you have. You have to take asset protection very seriously, and you have to do it on the front end before you have a lawsuit. Now, there are exceptions, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. One of my favorite asset protection vehicles is right here in my home state of Florida. It's called a Florida Homestead. And I'd like to start off with just a short quote that I wrote so you kind of get an idea what I'm talking about when I talk about a Florida homestead. All right, today's quote: Section 10, Article 10, Section 4 of the Florida Constitution exempts homestead property from levy and execution by judgment creditors. This is what is so great about Florida. It is the friendliest debtor jurisdiction in the world. And I think that pretty well says it right there. You can go anywhere in the world and not have a friendlier place to be if you are facing a judgment, if you have people coming after you for collection on debts. It doesn't get any better than Florida. And the Florida Homestead exemption is absolutely perfect for you. Specifically, the way it works is this: it protects up to 160 acres if you're outside of a municipality. So we'll just put 160 acres. If you're inside a municipality, in other words, like an incorporated area, like if it's like the city of Tampa is incorporated, so you are protected up to a half acre in that type of situation. If it's a rural area or unincorporated area, you can go all the way up to 160 acres that are protected. So what this means is, let's say you have a house that your family and everyone lives in, and there's a terrible judgment that unfortunately comes up, like the example I gave earlier. Let's go further, and let's say this house is worth let's just say it's worth $750,000, and let's just pretend you paid cash for it. You know, you paid it off. You paid cash or you paid the mortgage off over time. Well, the good news here is with very limited exceptions, that house can never be taken from you. It is absolutely exempt from a creditor's reach. It's in the Florida Constitution, in this the quote I just mentioned in Article 10. The reason it's good to be in the Constitution is it's stronger, the state Constitution, is that it's stronger than just a statute or an ordinance. The state Constitution is the highest law of the land in the state of Florida, second only to the United States Constitution, that doesn't address this particular issue. So, in other words, it is going to be extremely difficult for them to ever change this rule, and this is the way it's been for a very, very long time. This, in my opinion, is your best friend in life, and I think it is a boom to the state of Florida. And once people realize all the advantages that the state of Florida has, I think it's going to be even a more calling card for the state of Florida, as it is right now. Almost 1,000 people a day move to the state of Florida, and that's every single day of the year. There's a list of reasons why people are moving to the state of Florida. I'm sure the weather is among these decisions, but clearly having this homestead protection is fantastic. Now, to start off here, I want to be really clear. There are two types of homestead protections, and I don't want anybody to be confused here. Go homestead, and there are two different types, okay? Number one, there is one for taxes, and what I'm talking about is property tax. Generally, when you own a piece of property, the state is always charging you a property tax on that property every single year that you have to pay. Otherwise, you run the risk of losing the property. Well, in the state of Florida, there is a homestead tax exemption. Basically, it has to do with if you're military, if you're disabled, or if you actually live in the house. If you live in the house year after year, then you get a small tax deduction off your property tax. The one I'm talking about today is the one for asset protection. And people get this really confused. They just don't understand this. So I want to make sure I'm very clear about this. I'm talking about the asset protection today, not the tax deduction. I mean, the tax deduction's nice, but the homestead asset protection is fantastic. So let's continue into it here. When people there's a lot of rumors that are going on about the homestead exemption. There's a lot of people that are concerned about conflicting information online, this type of stuff. Well, I know exactly how this works. Right now I'm talking to you from my home in the state of Florida. I have a tax homestead exemption on the home, and the home is also protected from creditors, should I ever have a creditor that was to arise. The way it works in Florida is real simple. You are allowed to move to Florida and purchase a home, and as soon as you move into the home, as soon as you intend on it being, and you basically move into the property, it is protected as of that exact time frame that you move into it. And what's even more fantastic about this is, unlike any other state in the union, unlike any other place in the world, it is also protected against what they call statute of frauds, or what they call fraudulent conveyances. Basically, let's say like you have a judgment against you for some kind of debt. Let's say you got really sick. God forbid you had cancer or something, and your bills are running up. Well, you're allowed in the state of Florida to come here with your non-exempt assets, in other words, assets that can normally be reached by creditors, and you're allowed to purchase a house. Typically, let's just pretend you buy it for cash. That whole house, as soon as you move into it, is protected from your creditors. Normally, in most states, a creditor can go to the court and say, hey, judge, listen, they knew this judgment was here, they knew we were suing them, they knew there was something going on, and they went ahead and they bought this asset anyways in an effort to stop us from getting our hands on this money. Well, in most states, you'd just be out of luck. Not in the state of Florida. Thank God for the state of Florida. As soon as you move into that residence, hopefully that's day one, you are protected. Even though it came from money, that was what we refer to as non-exempt assets concerning your judgment creditors. So I know it's one of the things that sound almost too good to be true, and it is, in a way, too good to be true, but it is the law, and you're welcome to Google it and look it up yourself. Article 10, Section 4 of the Florida State Constitution. You can pull it up and read it for yourself. It's pretty easy to understand, and it's right there in black and white for you to look at. So, at any rate, there are a few things I want you to know about. There are basically 3 or 4 common sense exceptions to the homestead exemption, and we'll just go ahead and list them out briefly here. All right, number 1 is common sense, your mortgage. Okay, if you have and I know I'm a terrible speller, so at any rate, you know what that says. I normally use spell check, but anyway, your mortgage is obviously common sense. If you go to a bank and you say, give me $500,000 for a house, and you move into a house and you're paying monthly payments and you stop paying, you can't say this is my homestead, you can't take the house. It doesn't work that way. They will be able to take your house. The other exemption is what we call material man liens. And basically this is another common sense. Let's just say you have a plumber or a heating and air conditioning man that comes out and he does work on the property. You have to pay him for his work. If you don't pay him for the work, he can, and oftentimes will, put a lien on the property. And then at that point, they could force a foreclosure, hypothetically, on the property and collect their money. If you're ever worried about this particular situation, it's real simple. Don't hire anybody to do work on your property in the state of Florida. And if you do, make darn sure that you get a receipt from them showing that you have paid for the labor and the materials that they provided. Depending on what the project is, a lot of times I recommend to people to actually go to where they purchased the supplies and make sure that that bill is paid unconditionally. Get a receipt from the original supplier. It depends on what kind of project you're getting into, because you don't want a situation where basically you pay your contractor, but the contractor didn't pay the people he got his materials from. Generally that comes into play like if they're building a garage or something substantial on the house, like a substantial addition or something along them lines. Again, this is really reaching here, but it does happen. It has happened. It's unlikely to happen to you, but I'm just telling you what to do to protect yourself. The other thing I believe too, I think they have a form that's called something along the lines of a waiver of a lien, and if you have someone sign that, that pretty well protects you too. So at any rate, you just want to be careful with material man's liens. The third deal, we got our mortgage, we got our material man's lien, and then there's property taxes. Property taxes, and that's going to be property tax. That's another common sense. Obviously, the schools, the county, there's no sales tax. I should say there's no state income tax in the state of Florida, which I'll talk about in another video. They have to have some way to fund the state government, to fund the schools, and the way they do that is through property tax that you're paying your property. So you have to pay your property tax. If you don't pay your property tax, the county can and will sell your home. So you want to make sure you can afford the property tax. Generally in the state of Florida, property taxes are pretty affordable, so you don't really have a whole lot to worry about. Moving on, the last exception, if you will, is generally going to be something that's just kind of really weird, but basically it's going to be some kind of fraud. And we're not talking common law fraud. And I know this is getting really technical, so again, if you don't follow it, don't really worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. We're talking about fraud involving only the funds that the property was purchased with. We're not, again, we're splitting hairs here, but as I understand it, what we're dealing with here is there is a case law, there is a case that says something to the effect of if the property was purchased, for example, in cash, and the cash was directly taken from deceit or fraud, then it's possible the court could allow the house to be sold or to be taken to satisfy the funds. Now, again, there's a slight distinction between that example and, say, like a common law fraud. Let's just say like you had a judgment for some kind of civil obscure fraud or something like that. Generally, that is not the same thing. We're talking about where the money was taken from. I would probably say a clear example of that might be robbing a bank or something along them lines. So that would be, be an example. I will tell you, there's a lot of case law, and it kind of goes back and forth in Florida concerning this type of subject. And the good news is the courts are very, very reluctant to pierce a properly executed, let's just say a lived-in homestead. It's really just that simple. They don't want to do that. You need to know the background here. They're not trying, the courts here, the state here in Florida is not trying to necessarily give people a place to dodge their obligations on their bills or their judgments. What they're trying to do is protect families. They're trying to protect old people that come here with their life savings, and God forbid they get ill and they end up having to lose everything, including their home. The state doesn't want to see that. The state doesn't want to see families with children that end up having a child with a disability or some kind of problem, and the bills go through the roof, and they don't have the insurance for it, they don't have the money for it, they don't want to see them out on the street losing everything. So that's kind of the reasoning behind these these type of laws and this fantastic homestead exclusion that we're given here in the state of Florida. So it's one of the reasons I moved to the state of Florida, to be perfectly honest with you. I figured if I was going to live in a state, I might as well live in a state that has beautiful weather and has all these tax advantages, has no state sales tax, and has this homestead exemption. Texas has some similar laws like this, but I'll talk about it in another video. But even the great state of Texas does not have the type of protections we have here in Florida. They do have a lot of protections, but not the type of protections we have in Florida. I have people ask me too, hey, what do I have to do in order to have, to use a homestead protection? Do I have to fill a form? Do I have to declare something? Do I have to post something on my door? I mean, what do I do? Well, the short answer is this: nothing. You don't have to do anything. You just simply move into your home with the intent of living there. That's it. Just that simple. Now, there is something that you can file with the court, and I've done this myself. It's called a declaration of domicile. And basically what this does is it's just letting people know officially that on such and such date you're living at this address. So think of it as more like frosting on the cake. It's not necessary, but it is something that I see people do with regularity, and I have done myself. But again, it's not required by statute in order to have the asset protection homestead exemption that I'm referring to. Now, let's see here. Moving on, I want to make sure I had a couple questions I wrote down about this. I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything. One last thing on these exceptions to it. That you want to be careful of. Before you purchase a property in a particular county in Florida, you want to make sure that there are no current recorded liens or judgments in that county. Because if there was a recorded judgment, for example, let's just say you're in Tampa and you're in Hillsborough County, if there is a lien or something that is on file, and then you go in and you purchase your property, well, that lien will tie to that property, unfortunately. That kind of makes sense in a way, because they were there first with that recorded lien. Having said this, if you're new to Florida or there's no reason for someone to have filed what they call FISA or a whatever the legal term is for the judgment, if they haven't recorded the judgment in a particular county, you're fine. You don't have to worry about that. You can just simply move on and go ahead and purchase the house, and you're in great shape. Another couple things I want to mention too about the homestead is that, let's just pretend like you live your life in Florida for many years, and like we all do, we die. Okay, you die and you leave behind a Florida homestead. There's special things you need to know about it, and it's all good news. The good news is this: after you die, a creditor still cannot get a hold of your property. A creditor is, your property, I should say, is still protected from the creditors. In other words, the money from your homestead, once it is sold off because you're now deceased, the money and the proceeds will be distributed to your family, ever how you outlined it in your will. So let's you pretend like you have 3 kids. They're going to take your house for $100,000, just simple math here, and let's say that's 33.33. Each kid's going to get their section. That's just hypothetical math right there. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. Now, basically, what qualifies as a home in the state of Florida? For the most part, anything you live in that's a normal looking house is a house, whether it's an apartment, a condo, as long as you own it, it qualifies. Now, I have folks ask me about mobile homes. Well, does a mobile home count? Well, for the purpose of Section 10 of the Constitution, no, it does not count. However, there is a Florida statute, although it's not in the Constitution, it is a statute nonetheless, and that statute does protect your mobile home. You may want to see an attorney to get very clear and decisive information on that if you have any questions concerning that. But again, Florida is very accommodating to a lot of us on here. Now, one other thing I want to talk about is how do you title a Florida homestead exemption? A lot of people in a lot of different states, what are we told? We're told, well, go ahead and buy your house and transfer it to a living trust. Well, in some cases, in other states, that might make sense. You want to put, you may want to have like what they call a revocable living trust, and it's your name as a revocable living trust. And then the idea is it bypasses probate court when you die, and it just goes straight to your heirs. You don't want to do that in the state of Florida if you want to take the advantage of asset protection, because the statute in the Constitution is very clear. It's called natural persons. So it cannot be an LLC, it cannot be a corporation, it cannot be a trust, revocable or non-revocable. It has to be a natural person. So it needs to be in your name and or your wife's name or whoever's purchasing the property. It needs to be titled like that. So in the state of Florida, and again, only in the state of Florida, you're much better protected for asset protection purposes simply by having it in your name. Now, one thing I do want to talk about is, let's just say like it's you and your wife, for example. Let's say you got a home and you title it as Mr. X and Mrs. X. This is important for you to understand. There are pitfalls to titling it in both of your names, and here is the pitfall. Let's say Mr. X and Mrs. X break up. They're not even divorced, they just break up. And let's just pretend that Mrs. X moves out of the house to another house. Well, now you got a problem, because if the house is titled in Mr. X and Mrs. X's name, and Mrs. X was to move out of the home as her primary residence, and if there was a judgment for some reason and they were trying to collect on Mrs. X, a judgment creditor could tie into this house and take over Mrs. X portion of the house, if you will, and force it to be sold and then collect that way. So there are a few things you need to be aware of. I also see this type of situation where you got parents that, for asset protection reasons, or for probate reasons, they'll put a child's name on the house. And the thinking is, well, when the wife and husband are gone, then their child is left over, and the house is, just flows nicely to the children. The problem is, in the state of Florida, is if you were to title like that, and let's just pretend like the minor child or the adult child had a judgment creditor against them, that would open it up for that for a percentage of the home to be basically attacked by a judgment creditor. So you want to be very careful about that. And again, it's probably a good idea to go ahead and talk to a actual lawyer before you move to the state of Florida and purchase a home. I'm obviously giving you this information best with my best understanding. Now, obviously, I've done this before. I've been doing this for many years. I want to be very clear. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. I am not practicing anything. This is, based on my actual experience, my actual studies. I have been doing this type of thing in my general life, my general career for many years. So I'm very confident in what I'm telling you, but at the same time, I just want to make sure you understand you may need to seek actual professional help. And there are attorneys in the Tampa area and the Orlando area that specialize in asset protection. If you need a referral to one of them, feel free to drop me an email, and I'd be happy to make a referral. There's no connection between me and these attorneys I have in mind. It's just people that I know that practice this type of law. The other thing I want to mention to you in closing on a homestead is in bankruptcy. There are special provisions for bankruptcy, so you don't want to move to Florida, buy a home, and then declare bankruptcy right away, because there's special rules for that. Now, if you did something like that, and in a bankruptcy situation, you would still protect as an individual. As an individual, you still protect $160,000 as far as what's protected in a bankruptcy proceeding. And I think for a married couple, like a joint couple, I think it's $320,000 that's protected in a bankruptcy proceeding. But if you stay out of bankruptcy, you don't have to worry about that. If you go through bankruptcy for one reason or another, even like an involuntary bankruptcy, then you want to make sure you stay out of bankruptcy for 4 years, because once you're living in Florida and you stay out of bankruptcy for 4 years, you're pretty well over the hump, so to speak, and you don't have to worry about bankruptcy provisions, because then you will get the full benefit of Florida law with the statutory homestead exemption. The only other little caveat is that some bankruptcy trustees, and you want to be damn careful of these bankruptcy trustees, sometimes these bankruptcy trustees can go after your place for up to 10 years for cash that you might have actually improved a property with. So you want to kind of be careful with that too. But generally speaking, after the 4 years, you're probably in good shape, even in a bankruptcy type situation. And you're absolutely golden after 10 years in a bankruptcy situation. Now remember, bankruptcy has to do with federal law, doesn't have to do with state law. So even on day one, you're fully protected as far as state law is concerned. Just stay out of bankruptcy court. That's all you got to do. So at any rate, this has been my take on the wonderful exemption we get under Florida law called the Florida Homestead Exemption. And it's available to anybody that lives in the state or wants to move to this great state and purchase themselves some kind of property. It is the best jurisdiction in the world to live in if you're a debtor. And in my opinion, it's the best jurisdiction to live in, period, because you want to make sure you protect your wealth that you're going to spend your entire life trying to accumulate. And right here in the great state of Florida is the place to do it. Now, if you have any questions or if you'd like to make a comment, please comment below. Be sure to like the video if you found this of value. And at the same time, please subscribe. I'm going to be making a lot more videos. Obviously, this is my first video, as you can probably tell. Hopefully, I get even quicker at doing this and maybe better at doing it, if you will. But at any rate, this was my first shot at it. And you can always reach me simply at reachjrdukes@gmail.com. That's reachjrdukes@gmail.com. Again, make sure you keep your mind free, keep yourself positive, and feel free to contact me. Any kind of comments, questions, advice, I'm here to help you. Have a good evening.